Once upon a time, in the heart of the vast savannah in Georgia, where sprawling grasslands and dense forests painted a wild yet breathtakingly beautiful picture, there lay a small village. In that village lived a young man named Elijah. Just the mention of his name was enough to inspire both admiration and unease among the people of Savannah. Elijah was the only son of Lucille, the wealthiest woman in the region. With her chain of renowned luxury fabric stores, Lucille not only possessed immense wealth, but also wielded power far beyond anyone else in the village. Her dresses, shawls, and silks graced weddings and grand events from Savannah to Atlanta, but wealth and power always came with something else: rumors. And Lucille was at the center of more than a few whispered tales. Elijah, Lucille's beloved son, was the ideal every mother in the village dreamed of for their daughters, with deep, piercing eyes, chiseled features that seemed sculpted, and a strong physique. Elijah effortlessly captivated young women's hearts with just one glance. His elegance and striking appearance were like sunlight, warm yet dangerous. The closer you got, the more likely you were to get burned. Yet no one in the village dared venture beyond admiring him from afar, because no matter how alluring Elijah was, he remained an enigma shrouded in unanswered questions. People whispered in small cafes, on dusty red roads, and on porches that Elijah harbored a dark secret no one dared confront. Elijah wasn't just an ordinary bachelor. He had been married 6 times. Yes, 6. Yet now, not one of those wives remained with him. No goodbyes, no traces. Only a strange disappearance, as if they had never existed. And that was the source of the endless rumors. The people of Savannah, with their vivid imaginations and penchant for spicing up stories, concocted terrifying theories. Some said Elijah was so controlling that his wives had to flee to preserve their freedom. But how could 6 women all vanish without anyone knowing? Others whispered an even more chilling theory, that his mother, Lucille, was behind it all. They said she was a witch, a woman with piercing eyes that could see through anyone's soul. Rumor had it that she had killed her daughters-in-law in dark rituals to maintain her power and wealth. "Lucille is not a woman you want to cross," someone muttered with a worried look. "She's not just rich. She has mysteries we don't want to know about." As the rumors spread like wildfire during the summer, no one dared confront Elijah or Lucille directly. In this small village, who would want to go against Savannah's most powerful family? Elijah was the heir to a massive fortune, and Lucille controlled all the business dealings in the region. Crossing them was tantamount to closing every door to one's future. Instead, people kept a safe distance from the family, observing from afar with curious eyes and a touch of fear. The unanswered questions created a stifling atmosphere, as if the entire village of Savannah was holding its breath, waiting for something terrible to happen. The people of Savannah often said that whenever strong winds blew from the woods, they carried whispers of dark secrets. And in this little village, the mystery of Elijah and Lucille was a storm that never ceased. Would anyone be brave enough to cross the line of fear and uncover the truth? Or would everything remain forever buried in the shadows of rumors? In Savannah, nothing was ever simple. And with the Lucille family, simplicity was a concept that simply did not exist. It was a late afternoon, with the golden sunlight filtering through the large trees surrounding the village of Savannah. Leila, an orphaned girl who had lost her parents at a young age, was returning from the stream with her 2 closest friends, Chloe and Tasha. Their laughter echoed in the quiet air, creating an atmosphere of warmth and familiarity. Leila, carrying a basket of water, stood out in the scene. Her bright eyes sparkled with innocence, and her warm smile was as radiant as the sun shining down on Savannah's red soil. She was different, not just because of her beauty, but also because of her kind heart and optimism that rose above her hardships. Suddenly, a figure appeared on the dusty red road in the distance. Elijah, tall and confident, walked toward them. The moment his eyes met Leila's, time seemed to stop. Elijah's heart felt stolen by her natural, gentle beauty. Leila was unlike any woman he had ever met. It wasn't because she was overly striking, but because of a purity that made it impossible for him to look away. "Hello, Leila." His deep voice resonated, as if he were trying to conceal the emotions stirring inside. Chloe and Tasha immediately fell silent, their gazes curious, yet tinged with apprehension. Elijah was famous in the area, but not in the usual way. You want to speak with me alone?" Leila asked, surprised, her cheeks flushing pink. Elijah simply smiled and nodded, as though no one else in the world existed but her. That evening, in the small house where Leila lived, she couldn't contain her excitement as she recounted the afternoon's event to her two best friends. "Elijah wants to talk to me, can you believe it?" Leila said, hugging a pillow tightly, as if unable to control her joy. Chloe and Tasha, sitting across from her, exchanged worried glances. It wasn't that they didn't want their friend to be happy, but something about Elijah unsettled them. "Leila, do you know what people say about him?" Tasha spoke up, her voice lowering to a near whisper. Leila, still basking in her happiness, paused and looked at Tasha with curiosity. "What do they say?" "They say his 6 previous wives disappeared," Chloe added, trying to keep her voice steady but failing to hide her unease. "Disappeared?" Leila frowned, clearly not believing what she was hearing. "Yes, no one knows where they went, not a single trace. Some people say he was so controlling that they ran away. But others think his mother, Lucille, did something to them," Tasha explained, her eyes filled with suspicion. Their words were like a cold bucket of water poured over Leila's joy. She looked at them, half wanting to laugh at the absurdity and half irritated that they were ruining her perfect moment. "You're just jealous that I might marry someone like Elijah, aren't you?" Leila snapped, clearly offended. "Leila, it's not like that. We're just worried about you. We don't want you to get hurt." Chloe tried to reason, but Leila's gaze hardened. "Hurt? That's ridiculous. You just can't stand the idea of me having a chance to escape this life, can you? You don't want me to be happy." Leila stood up, her voice rising in anger as she stormed out of the room, leaving her two friends with their unresolved fears. Inside Leila, Chloe and Tasha's words began to stir a flicker of doubt, but she quickly brushed it aside. How could a gentleman as charming and kind as Elijah be involved in something so sinister? Leila looked out of her window, where the moonlight illuminated the road leading to Elijah's home. She thought about her life, the struggles, the small dreams of having a home and a family. Elijah was her chance to change her destiny, and she wouldn't let anyone stand in her way. Whatever the truth might be, Leila had made up her mind. She was ready to step into Elijah's world, despite her friends' warnings and the shadows of his past that lingered around him. The story at this point opened the door to deeper mysteries and greater horrors. What truly lay behind Elijah's gentle smile? Was Leila walking toward her dream or into a nightmare? And the rumours, were they merely baseless whispers born of jealousy, or did they hold a dark and dangerous truth? Leila grew up amidst the harsh realities of life in a small, weathered house on the outskirts of Savannah, Georgia. Her parents had passed away when she was too young to understand loss. With no one else to care for her, Leila was taken in by her grandmother, Cora, a strong-willed woman with calloused hands and a gentle heart. It was from Cora that Leila learned some of life's most valuable lessons. "Sweetheart," Cora often said, her sharp eyes reflecting a lifetime of wisdom. "The world isn't always what it seems. Some things you can't see with your eyes, but you can feel with your heart. Always listen to your instincts and never step into the dark without carrying a light." Cora's teachings remained deeply rooted in Leila's heart. Yet, the hardships of life and her simple dreams of a family often led her to overlook those warnings. She tried to dismiss the troubling rumours surrounding Elijah, the man who had made her heart flutter. To Leila, he was her chance to escape loneliness and step into a better life. Just days before her extravagant wedding to Elijah, Leila received an unexpected visit. It was Uncle Marcus, a distant relative she rarely saw. He arrived in simple clothes, his eyes filled with both concern and worry as he looked at her. "Leila," Uncle Marcus began, his voice lower and more serious than she had ever heard it before. "I heard you're marrying Elijah, but have you asked him about his previous wives?" Leila froze. Her uncle's question turned the air heavy. "What do you mean?" she asked, trying to hide the unease creeping into her voice. "Listen, I don't want to scare you," Marcus said, "but the rumors about Elijah, they can't be ignored. Ask him, Leila. Ask him before you step into a marriage you don't fully understand." Marcus's words echoed in Leila's mind throughout the day. That night, she arranged to meet Elijah beneath the old oak tree in the village centre. The tree, with its sprawling branches and thick canopy, had stood there for generations, silently guarding Savannah's secrets. Elijah appeared, his rugged demeanour and gentle smile as striking as ever. But this time, Leila didn't feel as at ease as before. The warnings and whispers from earlier began to stir uneasiness within her. "I need to ask you something," Leila said, trying to keep her voice steady. Elijah raised an eyebrow but maintained his warm smile. "What is it, my love?" Leila took a deep breath, summoning all her courage. "People say you've had 6 wives, and that they've all disappeared. Is that true?" Elijah's smile faltered for a split second. For a brief moment, a flicker of hesitation crossed his face, but he quickly recovered, chuckling softly as if her question were absurd. "Those are just baseless rumors, my darling. I've never been married before." "Are you sure?" Leila pressed, her voice trembling slightly. Elijah gazed deeply into her eyes, his own brimming with an almost disarming sincerity. "You don't trust me, Leila. I love you. That's all that matters. The gossip people spread means nothing." Leila felt the doubt in her heart begin to dissolve. Elijah's eyes, so sincere, so tender, made it hard for her to believe he was hiding anything. Yet a small part of her still felt uneasy, though she quickly pushed the feeling aside. "All right," Leila murmured, her voice barely audible. "I trust you." Elijah smiled and took her hand in his. "I promise, Leila. I'll make you happier than anyone else in this world." Under the sprawling oak tree, Leila and Elijah stood together. Though an unusual stillness seemed to hang in the air, the wind rustled through the branches, carrying whispers that Leila couldn't quite make out. When she returned home, Leila couldn't stop thinking about their conversation. Elijah's words had been persuasive, but why had he hesitated at first? And why were the rumors about him so persistent? She glanced at an old photograph of Cora sitting atop the wooden dresser. "What would you do if you were me?" Leila asked aloud, her voice breaking the silence of the room. Outside, the Savannah wind picked up again, sweeping through the trees with invisible whispers. Leila tried to shake off her unease, reminding herself that she was closer than ever to achieving her dream. Yet deep down, a faint intuition warned her that not everything was as it seemed. Savannah had never witnessed an event as grand as the wedding of Elijah and Leila. That day, sunlight illuminated the golden fields of Georgia, creating a scene straight out of a dream. From early morning, villagers and guests poured into the small village to attend what was being hailed as the wedding of the century. Leila, draped in a pristine white gown, walked down an aisle strewn with flower petals, looking like an angel come to life. Murmurs of admiration rippled through the crowd. "She's stunning. How lucky she is." Yet hidden behind many of those admiring gazes was an unspoken concern. The villagers were all too familiar with the whispers surrounding Elijah and his past. A few elders standing on the edges of the crowd exchanged furtive whispers. Does she know? Will she be safe? But no one dared voice their fears aloud. Instead, they silently prayed, hoping Leila's fate would differ from those who had come before her. As the sun dipped below the horizon and the wedding festivities came to a close, Leila was taken to Elijah's family estate. The mansion lay deep within the woods, surrounded by towering oak trees that loomed like silent sentinels, shielding the house and its secrets from the outside world. When the grand doors swung open, Leila was awestruck. The interior was magnificent. Crystal chandeliers cast shimmering light onto walls, adorned with pale gold wallpaper. Portraits of Elijah's ancestors hung in gilded frames, their painted eyes seeming to follow her every step. But her amazement soon gave way to unease. "This is our home?" Leila asked, her bright eyes alight with curiosity yet tinged with apprehension. Elijah smiled, but before he could reply, a cold voice echoed from the end of the hall. "Not just yours," said Lucille, Elijah's mother, as she stepped forward, her cane tapping sharply against the floor. Her sharp gaze scanned Leila from head to toe, as though evaluating a new addition to her collection. "This is my home as well, and from now on you'll be living here, with me." Leila froze. Live together? Hadn't she dreamed of starting a private, happy life with Elijah? "Mother, you'll be living with us?" Leila asked, striving to keep her voice steady, though it quivered slightly. "Of course," Lucille replied, her icy eyes locking onto Leila. "That's how it's always been in this family. I must ensure that this household runs as it should." Leila turned to Elijah, seeking reassurance from her new husband, but Elijah stood silent, as though unwilling or unable to defy his mother. "What do you think about this?" Leila whispered, hoping for a comforting response. "Sure." Elijah rested a hand gently on her shoulder. "My love, Mother has her ways. We should respect them," he said, his tone calm but devoid of warmth. The first days in the mansion quickly became oppressive. Lucille was not merely a presence in the household, she was its ruler. She imposed strict rules and Leila had no choice but to comply. "You are not to enter the West Wing," Lucille declared one day, her sharp gaze piercing Leila. "That part of the house is off limits to you. Always." The West Wing? Why was it forbidden? Questions swirled in Leila's mind, but she dared not ask further. Each morning, Lucille presided over the dining table like a queen, issuing orders and dictating the day's activities. Leila, who had dreamed of being a beloved bride, now felt more like a servant than a family member. At night, as the mansion's lights dimmed, unease crept in. Strange sounds echoed from the West Wing, soft murmurs, creaking floorboards, and the faint whisper of wind through unseen cracks. The unsettling noises often jolted Leila awake, her heart pounding as if someone, or something, was watching her. The dreams soon followed, vivid and eerie. Shadowy figures flitted through her mind, and distant voices called her name from the darkness. One night, unable to bear the tension, she gathered her courage and asked Elijah about the noises. "Have you heard anything? At night? The sounds from the West Wing?" Leila's voice trembled slightly as she spoke. Elijah chuckled softly, shaking his head. "My love, it's just your imagination. This house is old, sounds can echo from anywhere." But Leila knew that wasn't true. She could feel it. A presence, an unseen force lingering just out of sight. Something or someone was always there, hidden in the shadows. What had started as a dreamlike wedding had now unraveled into a reality filled with doubt and fear. The mansion, once envisioned as her sanctuary, felt more like a gilded prison. And with each passing day, Leila sensed she was drawing closer to uncovering a dark secret, one that no one dared speak of. The first night in Elijah's sprawling family mansion was eerily quiet, too quiet to bring any sense of peace. Leila lay on the massive four-poster bed, surrounded by walls adorned with old paintings and heavy drapes, a constant feeling of being watched gnawing at her. The room was colder than she had expected, even though the warm Savannah summer air still lingered outside. The wind whispered through unseen cracks, creating murmurs that felt like voices from a distant past. Leila tried to close her eyes, willing herself to sleep, but unease churned within her. When she finally drifted off, it wasn't into the blissful dreams of her new life, but into a realm of darkness. In her dream, Leila found herself standing in the heart of an ominous forest. Pale moonlight filtered weakly through the towering trees, casting faint shadows but offering no clarity to the path ahead. The air was thick, suffocating, as though it conspired to steal her breath. Suddenly, a soft yet bone-chilling hiss echoed in the distance. She spun around to see a colossal snake slithering through the dried leaves. Its scaled body rippled with menace, and its glowing red eyes locked onto her like fiery embers. Panic surged through her as she turned to flee, but her legs felt heavy, as though shackled by some invisible force. The hissing grew louder, the hot, rancid breath of the serpent brushing against the back of her neck. She screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the oppressive darkness of the forest. Leila woke with a start, her body drenched in sweat, her heart hammering against her ribs. The vividness of the dream left her trembling as though the serpent's gaze still lingered on her. She sat up, trying to steady her breathing, but the unease refused to let go. Moonlight seeped through the heavy curtains, casting strange, elongated shadows across the floor. She shuddered, convincing herself it was just a nightmare, yet the vivid detail made it impossible to dismiss. The next morning, as sunlight streamed into the dining room, the terrifying night felt somewhat distant. Seated across from Elijah, Leila hesitated before softly saying, "Elijah, I had the most unsettling dream last night. It felt so real." Elijah looked up from his plate, his smile gentle but distant. "It's just a nightmare, my love. Don't let it trouble you. Yesterday was overwhelming. Perhaps that's why your mind conjured such images." Leila nodded slowly, trying to believe him, but something in his expression gave her pause. Was it concern or something else he wasn't saying? Despite Elijah's reassurances, the unease stayed with her. There was something about the mansion, about his family, that felt inexplicably wrong. That night, Leila's sleep was once again invaded by strange visions. This time, the dream transported her back to the dark forest, but instead of being chased, she now stood before a decrepit house, its windows pitch black like gaping voids. From the shadows, pairs of glowing red eyes emerged, watching her silently, waiting. As she hesitated, the front door creaked open, the sound cutting through the suffocating silence like a blade. A voice, deep and commanding, echoed from within. "You do not belong here." Leila bolted upright in bed, her chest heaving. The words from the dream lingered in her ears, as real as if someone had whispered them into her room. She wrapped her arms around herself, unwilling to disturb Elijah this time. Something told her she would not find comfort in his response. In the days that followed, Leila began noticing subtle but unnerving details about the house. Footsteps echoed through empty hallways, and doors creaked shut despite the absence of wind. The oppressive sensation of being watched grew stronger with each passing moment, like an unseen presence trailing her every step. By the second night, she was certain the mansion held more than just architectural grandeur. It harbored secrets. That evening, she dreamed again of the shadowy house. This time, as she approached, the glowing eyes multiplied, filling the darkness. The door swung open without a sound, revealing a long corridor lined with mirrors. From within, the same voice as before whispered, "You must leave, before it's too late." Leila awoke with the same dread clinging to her like a shroud. By now, she knew these weren't ordinary nightmares. Were they the manifestations of her anxiety? Or were they warnings from something or someone within the house? Determined to uncover the truth, Leila began to observe everything more closely. She started to question her husband, his mother, and even the history of the house. But each attempt was met with vague answers or unsettling deflections. One morning, as Leila was tidying up in their shared bedroom, Lucille entered without knocking. Her imposing presence and icy demeanour filled the room. "You're settling in, I presume?" Lucille asked, her tone sharp, more command than question. Leila nodded hesitantly, unsure of how to respond. Lucille stepped closer, her eyes narrowing. "Good. I trust you've been respectful of the rules?" "Yes, Mom," Leila replied, her voice steady but wary. Lucille leaned in, her voice lowering to a near whisper. "Remember, child, this house has its way of teaching lessons to those who do not obey." As Lucille turned and walked away, Leila's unease deepened. What did she mean by teaching lessons? Leila knew then that the answers she sought would not come easily. Whatever was hidden within the house, it was something the family, and the house itself, were determined to keep from her. "Leila," Lucille's voice cut through the air like the sharp edge of a blade. "You and Elijah have fulfilled your duty as a married couple. From now on, you will sleep in a separate room." The words hit Leila like a bolt of lightning. She stared at her mother-in-law in disbelief. But why? Elijah and I are husband and wife. We should be together, she protested, trying to keep her composure. You don't need to understand why, Lucille replied, her cold gaze piercing through Leila. I know what is best for this family. Leila turned to Elijah, desperate for support, but he remained silent, his eyes fixed on the floor, avoiding hers. The man she had trusted with her heart now seemed like a stranger. Within hours, Leila's belongings were moved into a small, dimly lit room at the far end of the hall, far away from the main bedroom she once shared with Elijah. The room was suffocatingly narrow, furnished with only an old rickety bed and a mildew-covered wooden wardrobe. The isolation was unbearable. Each evening, Leila could hear faint laughter and conversation from Lucille's quarters, where Elijah often stayed, yet her door remained firmly shut, confining her to the cold solitude of her new reality. The days that followed marked the transformation of Leila's role in the house. No longer a wife, she felt reduced to the status of a servant. Every morning before sunrise, Lucille would summon her to prepare breakfast, clean the sprawling mansion, and even wash the family's laundry. You must learn to contribute to the family, Lucille often said with a mocking smile. Not everything comes easily, just because you're now a part of this household. Elijah, once tender and protective, had become distant and cold. His affectionate gestures and kind words disappeared, replaced by a sharp, critical demeanor. Worse still, whenever Leila failed to meet Lucille's expectations, Elijah would scold her harshly. One evening, when dinner was not served promptly, Elijah's frustration boiled over. He grabbed a plate from the table and hurled it to the ground, the sound of shattering porcelain echoing in the dining room. "Is it so hard for you to do something right?" he yelled, his eyes blazing with anger. Trembling, Leila knelt to pick up the shards, her tears falling silently. Lucille stood nearby, her arms crossed, a faint, satisfied smirk playing on her lips, as if everything was going according to plan. But as the days turned into weeks, Leila began to notice something far more sinister within the walls of the house. She felt an unshakable sense of being watched, even when alone. Passing through the shadowy hallways, she could swear she saw fleeting movements in the corners of her vision. At night, faint whispers echoed in the darkness, too soft to be words, yet unmistakably present. The mansion seemed alive, as though it pulsed with secrets too terrible to reveal. Leila's unease deepened when she recalled whispers about Elijah's previous wives. These rumors, which she had dismissed before, now clawed their way back into her mind. What had happened to those women? And why did no one speak of them openly? One night, unable to sleep, Leila wandered into the dusty attic in search of answers. Among the old trunks and cobweb-covered furniture, she discovered a weathered photo album. Flipping through its pages, she froze at the sight of a photograph of Elijah with a woman who looked remarkably like her. The woman's eyes stared back at Leila, filled with a haunting mix of sorrow and terror. The inscription beneath the photo read, Elijah and Margaret, 1947. Margaret, one of his former wives. Her pulse quickened as she turned the pages, finding similar photos of other women, each with Elijah, each bearing an eerie resemblance to her. And each photo carried an inscription marking a year. The most recent was dated 2018. Leila's hands trembled as she closed the album. Her breath caught in her throat as she realized that all of these women had vanished, just as their names had disappeared from any mention within the house. The realization struck Leila like a thunderclap. She wasn't just a victim of Lucille's cruelty or Elijah's coldness. She was a part of something much darker, a cycle she had unwittingly stepped into. But why her? And what had happened to the women before her? From that night on, Leila knew she could no longer ignore the signs. The mansion's whispers were no longer a figment of her imagination. They were warnings. The chilling presence she felt was not a product of her fear, but a manifestation of the house itself, alive, aware, and complicit in the horrors it concealed. Leila resolved to find a way out, but escape would not come easily. Lucille's icy grip on the household was unyielding, and Elijah's growing hostility made it clear that he would not be her ally. The question that burned in Leila's mind as she lay awake each night was no longer why, it was how. How had she allowed herself to be lured into this gilded cage? How could she survive the sinister forces that conspired to keep her trapped? And how could she uncover the truth about the women who had come before her, before she became the next forgotten name in the house's blood-stained history? Leila knew time was running out. The mansion was not just a prison, it was a predator, and she was its prey. That night, the Savannah mansion was engulfed in an eerie silence, broken only by the faint whistle of the wind passing through the old, creaky window frames. Leila sat in her small room, her eyes swollen and red from countless sleepless nights. She couldn't endure another day. The harsh scolding, the disdainful glares of Mrs. Lucille, and Elijah's cold, detached silence had drained her completely, both mentally and physically. Leila took a deep breath, determined that she had to escape. If she didn't, she wouldn't just lose her freedom, she might lose herself entirely. She quietly gathered a few essential items, a worn-out cloak, a handful of coins she had secretly hidden away since her first days there, and a small notebook containing keepsakes from her old family. Before leaving the room, she turned back for one last glance. It wasn't a look of regret, but rather the gaze of someone ready to leave the past behind. She carefully opened the door and stepped into the pitch-dark hallway. The creaking of the wooden floor beneath her feet made her pause, her heart pounding in her chest. She listened closely, but the house remained still, as if everything inside it was in a deep slumber. When she neared the main door, a sudden chill brushed the back of her neck. A shiver ran down her spine, but she shook her head, convincing herself it was just her fear. She opened the door and stepped outside, never looking back. Outside, the night sky was pitch black, with only the pale moonlight, faintly illuminating the dirt path leading out of the village. Pulling her cloak tightly around her to shield against the biting wind, Leila walked quickly but refrained from running, fearing that any sound might awaken the house she had left behind. But as she ventured farther, a familiar yet haunting sound echoed behind her. Footsteps. Leila froze, her heart nearly stopping. Someone was following her. She turned her head, but the dense darkness obscured everything. She tried to convince herself it was just the wind rustling the trees. Then the sound came again. This time, closer. The slow, deliberate rhythm of the steps felt intentional, as though whoever or whatever it was wanted her to feel pursued but not yet overtaken. Unable to maintain her composure, Leila began to run. Her feet pounded against the muddy ground, her breath quick and uneven. But the footsteps behind her matched her pace, closing in. Fear swelled in her chest like a tidal wave. At last, she had no choice but to turn around, and in that moment, her heart felt as though it had been seized in a cold, unrelenting grip. There, in the pale moonlight, stood Mrs. Lucille. But it wasn't the Lucille that Leila once knew. This was a terrifying version of her, with glowing red eyes that burned like twin flames in the darkness. Her skin appeared taut, reflecting a strange greenish hue, and her mouth twisted into a horrifying smile. "Did you really think you could escape?" Lucille's voice cut through the air like a hiss, filled with anger and malice. Leila stumbled backward, her foot catching on a rock, sending her sprawling to the ground. Lucille stepped closer, her fiery eyes never leaving Leila. "I told you," Lucille whispered, her voice soft but echoing in Leila's mind. "No one leaves this family. You think you're special? That you can break the curse that the 6 before you couldn't escape?" Horror overtook Leila as Lucille's words rekindled every rumor she'd ever heard. The missing wives, the dark secrets of this house, and Elijah's cold, distant stares all came together in her mind, painting a chilling picture. "What did you do to them?" Leila screamed, tears streaming down her face. Lucille let out a cruel laugh but didn't answer. Instead, she began murmuring strange, unintelligible words, like an incantation. The wind around Leila suddenly surged, whipping her hair and cloak violently. The ground beneath her trembled, as if the very earth of Savannah was awakening, complicit in Lucille's will. Leila tried to stand, but an invisible force pinned her down. She could only watch in terror as Lucille's form began to change. Her body convulsed and distorted. From her lower half, a long, glistening tail emerged, replacing her legs. It was the tail of a massive serpent coiling itself around her feet, a clear declaration that Leila would not escape. "Now you know why," Lucille hissed, her smile more gourmet, more grotesque than ever. "I always keep what's mine. And you belong to me." Leila screamed in despair, but her voice was drowned out by the howling wind and Lucille's chilling laughter. Stumbling to her feet, Leila found herself in the shadowy depths of the forest. Pale moonlight filtered through the trees, casting eerie, shifting shadows on the ground. Before her, Lucille loomed, her blazing red eyes like twin rubies smouldering in the darkness. She was no longer human, but the embodiment of something ancient and horrifying. She began murmuring strange, whispering words like the wind howling through the treetops, making the air around them thick and suffocating. The unfamiliar words, unlike any language Leila had ever heard, echoed in the dark of the night. "Stop!" Leila screamed, her voice choked with fear. "Why are you doing this to me? I haven't done anything wrong." Mrs. Lucille stared at her, her eyes piercing as if they could see straight through her soul. "Wrong!" she hissed, her voice blending with the rising wind. "You dared to break this family. This is the fate of anyone who dares to defy me." The moment those final words left her lips, a powerful gust of wind swept through, scattering dust and dry leaves. The ground beneath Leila trembled, and she felt as if the entire forest was awakening, complicit in Mrs. Lucille's curse. Before her eyes, Mrs. Lucille's body began to transform. Her long, slender toes curled, and in their place, a long, glossy snake tail appeared, coiling around her body. The sound of skin scraping against the earth filled the air, making Leila feel as though thousands of snakes were closing in on her. Leila screamed and staggered back a few steps, but she had nowhere to run. "Don't do this! Please stop!" she cried in desperation, tears streaming down her face. But Mrs. Lucille didn't stop. Her body continued to change. The upper half remained human, but her lower half had fully transformed into that of a massive snake, glistening in the faint moonlight. A terrifying smile spread across her face, full of malice and challenge. Suddenly, a strange light emanated from Mrs. Lucille's hands, surrounding Leila. She felt her body tremble, as if something was invading her very cells. "No, don't!" Leila screamed, but her voice seemed to be swallowed by the darkness. She looked down at her hands and recoiled in horror as she realized her skin was beginning to change. Her smooth skin turned cold, slick, and covered in tiny, shimmering snake scales. "No, this can't be happening." Leila panicked, trying to wipe away the scales, but they only spread further. Her arms, her legs, everything about her was transforming. A cold sensation spread through her body, and she knew she couldn't stop it. "Why? Why are you doing this to me?" she screamed, her eyes filled with despair. "Because you dared betray my trust," Mrs. Lucille growled. "This family does not accept the weak, and now you'll learn. No one escapes this curse." Leila collapsed to the ground, her body convulsing in pain. She felt the change deep within her, not just physically, but mentally as well. Her thoughts grew fragmented, the beautiful memories of her past fading away, replaced by a strange primal sensation, an instinct, unfamiliar yet powerful. She tried to stand, but she couldn't. Her lower body had completely transformed into a snake's tail, smooth and full of strength. Leila attempted to scream, but the sound that came from her mouth was no longer human. It was a chilling hiss that echoed through the forest. "You've turned me into a monster," Leila whispered, her voice now strangled in her throat. "You're not a monster," Mrs. Lucille said, her tone cold yet defiant. "You're a warning, a reminder to anyone who dares challenge my power." Leila tried to cry out for help, but in this desolate forest, no one would hear her. The trees seemed to lean down, hiding her existence from the outside world. She looked around, but all she saw was darkness and the glowing red eyes of Mrs. Lucille, who had now stepped back, leaving Leila alone in her new form. Leila no longer recognized herself. She didn't know if she was still human, and more importantly, she didn't know if she had the strength left to fight for her humanity. The story of Leila closes with a haunting image. She crawls through the Savannah forest, no longer the person we once knew. From a hopeful girl entering what seemed to be a perfect marriage, Leila is now transformed into the embodiment of a dark curse. But is this truly the end of her story? Or is this just the beginning of a journey full of tragedy, struggle, and perhaps even hope? This is not just Leila's journey, but also a profound reflection on humanity. What will we do when faced with forces greater than ourselves? Do we have the courage to rise up and fight for freedom, for the truth, for ourselves? Part 2 will not only be a tale of survival, but also Leila's journey to rediscover herself. It will delve deeper into the power of courage, hope, and the value of truth in a world distorted by lies and dark magic. Can Leila overcome the darkness, break the curse, and reclaim her humanity? What secrets await to be uncovered in the Savannah house? And can the love she once had for Elijah save him, or is he part of an inescapable darkness? Stay tuned to uncover it all in the next installment, a story full of surprises and emotion that will keep you glued to the screen.